So today we're going to break down Baby Brokers. You can watch this unfiltered on PBS, on YouTube as well. I want to go through some clips with you guys, but before I get started, there are some things that I want to mention. So I'm kind of going into this with a grain of salt. Yes, from when I first heard about this, I'm like, I'm super excited. They're kind of getting into the point that's human trafficking. I'm really happy. And then I watched the clip, or sorry, not the clip, the entire documentary, and I have some concerns. Now, I did post a 10-minute kind of concerning video, breaking it down the other day, kind of giving like a glimpse of what we're going to be talking about. But number one was the journalist, Gabrielle Glazer, who also wrote American Baby, which we are currently reading. If you guys listen to my prologue, you'll understand why I'm concerned. Number one, she said, and I quote, in that prologue, she was a journal. Hold on. You know what? My phone is right in front of me. And I'm going to read you the clip, what I'm talking about, so that you guys understand. You guys can also just go to the prologue. But she says, so she started an interview in 2007 with this person that we're going to be talking about in the book. And then I'm trying to find the exact quote for you guys. So majority of her prologue goes from 2014 on. So this is 7 years from when she originally had started talking to this individual, which then transpired into an adoption thing. But she had been doing adoption journalism for a long time, right? And she was like, oh, I didn't realize all these bad things. And I'm thinking, if you are a journalist for a specific topic, you would do your research. This information has been out there readily at your fingertips for a long time, right? Maybe not on your phone, but you have access to libraries, you have access to computers and other research. Why are you this adoption journalist, but yet you don't know the horrors? You haven't listened to other adoptees. You haven't dug down into the laws. And it makes me concerned just going into this book, right? And again, I'm talking about the book, not the documentary. Now, I did watch the whole documentary before we begin talking about it. So I will say she did a decent job, and I understand journalists' jobs are to be unbiased and maybe not say anything. And of course, there's editing and all that, right? I get that. I do. But I will tell you, before we begin, I cringed a lot about who we're going to be introduced to, why we're introduced to them, and the outcome of some of these situations. Obviously, technically, by journalism standards, you're not supposed to intervene. That's a whole big thing. But I want to start off this video, even though I'm an adoptee, right? Even without knowing that this journalist is who she is. Okay, glad we are talking that adoption is a human trafficking industry. She knows more now than she ever did before, and that is fantastic. But you wrote a book a few years ago where you were talking about you being a professional journalist in the adoption realm, and you were biased. So I kind of side-eye things. Anyway, let's get into the entire documentary because there is a lot that I want to break down.
Unstable housing situations, financial instability, pretty deep poverty.
In collaboration with Retro Report, correspondent Gabrielle Glazer investigates a hidden side of the adoption industry.
Can I facepalm people? Okay, look, I know that's a documentary and stuff, and I know that I know more than most. even as an adoptee, because I deep dive into this. This is my life's work, and, you know, I am a professional when it comes to adoption, knowing the history, the laws, the statistics. But to say that it's hidden is bullshit. To say that nobody knows about this, there have been adoptees talking about this since the 1920s. Literally, since the 1920s. This information is not new. And to say that it's been hidden, no, people have been talking about it. People have been talking about it, especially adoptees. People like you, narrator, like other people who are not adoptees, whether you're a birth parent, an adoptive parent, or nowhere near the constellation, choose to ignore adoptees. But our voices have been out there. There have been court cases for years, decades prior, and you just think, oh, this is just new. It's just coming to light. Fucking bullshit. And I'm not sorry for cursing, because that is what I do, but this is utter bullshit. They found this out with Georgia Tann in 1953 and pulled some of the same bullshit. And I talked about that in my video, kind of glazing over what's going to happen in this video. Similar things happened with Georgia Tann, a known human trafficker who made adoption privatized. Information that was out in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s, or 50 when she got caught and died. You guys just hate adoptees. Just say it. I'm sorry. Like, I'm going to rant because I'm so frustrated that adoptees talk out on this, and then it's, oh my gosh, you're crazy. Oh my gosh, what are you? Like, you don't know what you're talking about. Oh my gosh. And then when something like this comes out, right, from a journalist from a really great organization called PBS, oh my gosh, you guys were oh my gosh, it is human trafficking. I'm sorry, I'm tired of the fucking bullshit. And I'm gonna yell, and I'm so sorry. I don't mean, if you are wearing headphones, I apologize. This is so frustrating. And we're gonna see people being interviewed, and I want to be like, you almost got the point. You almost got it. Okay, sorry. Continuing on.
I don't know a single adoptive parent who wants to buy a baby. I would never want my children to feel like they were bought and sold.
The law says you can't buy a baby. That's the law, okay? But can you help this birth mom?
The efforts for reform.
We have more work that we need to do in this area to try to end the exploitation that we know is occurring among these birth mothers.
This is not a problem that states individually can solve alone.
And the impact on families.
Everything was just too fast. She was reading, she pointed, I signed.
I remember walking in and there was all these pregnant women like sleeping on the floor, just being like, what have we done?
Now on Frontline, baby brokers.
So we haven't even gotten into all these interviews and stuff, and I just want to say, like, that is what we're about to get into. There are some people that are clearly like, okay, there is an issue, but they are still very rose-colored glasses and very still talking about the pedestal of putting adoptive parents ahead of bio parents, although they're kind of gaining a little bit of traction in this, but never about the adoptee. There is only one adoptee that will be featured in this, and that is only because she's also a biological mother. Only because. And we don't see the issue with that. We don't see the issue with not talking about the impact it has on adoptees. Like, this is frustrating to... Now, look, I've been doing this a while, and I understand that we need to talk about it, and it's going to take hours and days and months, and I am so tired. And yes, I do think that part of it should be federally oversighted, but also that terrifies me because we already have issues state to state, right? We have majority of states are closed adoptions, right? We as adoptees do not have the same human rights, period. We already have the Supreme Court in 1993 talking about not opening our records because more than half of those Supreme Court judges, which some of them are the same as today, are adoptive parents or of some sort, safe external care providers, guardians, like Clarence Thomas, for example. They don't actually give a shit about the adoptees, right? Whether they are babies or they are adult adoptees. We don't have a distinction at this point. We are treated the same. Oh, look, we can use you as a baby. You can get sold. And then guess what? We don't want the product talking. My God, God forbid they tell us that they feel like they are a product and they were sold. Oh, but us adoptive parents, we didn't buy you. It was just a service. Shoo. We are going to get into that. But this is what's frustrating. Not once in this documentary, except for the fact that one of the people she interviewed, who we are about to see, was an adoptee.
A local adoption agency tells us it can take up to 2 years or more for a family to adopt.
The birth rate is down in the U.S., leaving a lot more waiting families than available infants. And there are far fewer infants.
I've been reporting and writing about adoptions in the U.S. for years. As it's grown into a multi-billion-dollar industry, and demand has gotten so high that prospective parents outnumber infants by more than 40 to 1.
Okay, this is from National Council for Adoption. This first photo is from a 2025 report. This shows that it has been kind of, it's been kind of steady, but it was slowly decreasing for a while, and then increased in the last couple years between 2019 and 2022. This was a report post-pandemic, and I wanted to highlight that, right? However, in the second photo, this was a report from 2023 since 2022. So it was actually 20 years worth, I think, of records, and you can see that intercountry adoptions have decreased 93% in the last 20 plus years. They've decreased from 18% over 3 years from 2019 to 2021. And there's more. You can find this on the National Council for Adoption. Again, I am not a huge fan of National Council for Adoption because they are lobbyists for laws to keep adoption privatized, and they don't actually care about adoptees or foster youth. Just want to say that. But their stats are not totally inaccurate. You can also check this with childwelfare.gov if you actually put in all the numbers. So I will use them on occasion, but I always say take things with a grain of salt. Yes, adoptions have decreased a significant amount in the last 20 years. And part of that is because people are waking up and realizing that adoption is human trafficking. That it's not filling a void. That for adoptive parents, it is costly. For bio parents, because the adoptive parents lied, because it's abusive. A lot of international adoptions even shut down because of the harm. So we have, this has to be discussed.
Countries that used to adopt out thousands of orphans a year have tightened up their rules.
So this is true. Here is a small list. It does read if you can't read it. China in 2024 completely terminated its international adoption program to the United States. Russia in January of 2013. Ethiopia in February of 2018. Guatemala in 2008. Cambodia in 2001, and there are others which are very restricted including nations like Haiti, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. Okay, this is only a small fraction, and earliest 2001. Their reasonings, again, if you can't read it, is hold on, I'm trying to read some things. Foreign adoptions for Ethiopia due to systematic abuse, coercion, and fraud. Haiti stopped, not Haiti, Guatemala stopped all international adoptions in 2008 due to rampant corruption and child trafficking scandals. Cambodia, 2001. All foreign adoptions due to unethical and illegal practices. Mind you, these countries recognize this in many different countries, not just to the United States, and stop them. A lot of them also stopped the domestic supply and changed their policy. So even then, they also stopped doing domestic adoptions or lowered the amount. Other countries have recognized this being an issue and stopped adoptions. Not just to our country in the United States, but also to other countries. And we can't figure this out. Australia completely overhauled their adoption system, right? Foster care and adoption, so that there is a way that very few adoptions happen, but children who are removed, right? They do mix foster care and adoption. There's no private infant adoption. We're actually the only country that has privatized infant adoption. A lot of these adoptions are through foster care. I just want to add, we're the only country that also has it for money. Keep that in mind. Yeah. So what I was saying about Australia was they overhauled their system, so they really, really put into place that reunification is the key, right? How do we help families in need? And they are doing a fantastic job from my understanding, from my research. Then, if the child cannot be reunified with their biological parents, they go to kinship. When that can't happen, fictive kin, right? So a family friend or someone within the same culture. And then lastly would be what we would consider a guardianship. If that still doesn't work, then they'll do the adoption. So they only have like 2 or 3 adoptions a year. We also now have places like Ireland apologizing for the harm that they did specifically to birth mothers. I think I saw Korea also just apologize. Let me just double check that before we go further. And I say Korea as in South Korea. Yes. According to an article in, I want to say this just happened too. Let's see when this happened. 2025. This was October in 2025. South Korea's president apologizes over poorly managed foreign adoption programs. But I think I just saw something even more recently about adoption apology from international. I know that something had, okay, here it is. It was the United Nations, not the United Nations, the UK, the United Kingdom, formally apologizes for states' role in forcing unwed mothers to give up babies for adoption. So other countries are making progress by, 1, taking accountability and apologizing, 2, changing the system a little bit, right? UK still has issues of their own, but it's getting slightly better in other ways and slightly worse in some ways. We will go through that in a different video, but the point is that other countries can recognize that there is a problem with adoption. And these are countries that do not have privatized infant adoption. How do we not understand? I do not get it.
Many states have strict laws that govern adoptions. But over the past few years, I've been investigating a more loosely regulated corner of the industry, where pregnant women are often lured far from their home states by so-called baby brokers.
Hi, it's me again. I know I'm going to be interrupting a lot in this video. Here's the thing, those laws do not ever protect the biological parents, let alone the adoptees, who are the only people in this dynamic that never have a choice. Never. We are put into a lifelong contract we can never get out of. In order to be unadopted, we have to be readopted. A lot of us cannot even access our original birth certificates, which not only get falsified but sealed away. We lose human rights because of these quote-unquote adoption laws. And all they do is protect adoptive parents and the agencies. That's all they care about. All they care about is the money. They don't give a shit about our human rights or what is in the actual benefit of the child. They say, oh, quote, best interest of the child. The best interest of the child, mind you. And studies have shown for decades, that the best interest of the child is for the child to remain in a two-parent household with two biological parents. And anytime that is disrupted, it becomes significantly riskier for the child. Mind you, this goes for step-parent adoptees, this goes for foster youth, this goes for guardianship, kinship, fictive kin. It doesn't matter what form of safe external care you have, we are all at the same risks. But again, they don't give a shit. And all they do are protecting the human traffickers and those that are participating in the human trafficking industry. These laws were never meant to protect us. And when I'm going to do a whole video on closed adoption versus open, but all it is a marketing ploy that, again, does not protect the biological parent. None of these laws actually protect biological parents, ever. Now, some people might be like, but the bio parent chose to relinquish the child, but the bio parent chose a closed adoption. Here's the thing, society often pressured them, it's coercive, and you will see this throughout this, documentary that they are talking about, that coercion. But what they enter into, if they have an open adoption, it's what's called a PACA agreement, a post-adoption contact agreement. And although it's a document, it is not legally enforced. And who does that not benefit? That does not benefit the child. We are never putting the child first. But again, so many refuse to listen to adoptees because, my goodness, the product is speaking. And they hate that. They hate adult adoptees. They hate when we speak out against the industry. Why? Because we make them lose money. They're no longer benefiting when we make them close down. Now, often agencies might close down and then reopen under another name. We see this quite often. It's not always the case, but they hate when we call out the truth. They hate it. But you know what my job is? My job is to tell the truth. My job is to show you guys what is really happening.
Offering quick money to them and quick adoptions to hopeful parents.
About how Utah's loose adoption laws have led the state to become a destination for adoption tourism, with pregnant women and adoptive families traveling from all over the country to come here.
I'm sorry, you guys are going to be so sick of me. Here's the thing. A lot of people who are religious also use these practices, these Utah specifically, and they're still home for unwed mothers. We have the book The Girls Who Went Away by Ann Fessler, and I do have the entire reading up on my YouTube channel. Go check it out. or go read her book, because she is an adoptee, but she does talk to biological parents who were forced to relinquish their child during that time and their experiences in these homes. These homes still exist in 2026. There is still similar pressure, especially in very religious groups like Mormonism, right? Where these young women who are unwed are forced to go away to a place like Utah, live, and then force their child to be relinquished. Not by choice. And then there's society pressure, right? Now, it's not as bad as it used to be, but there's still a lot of pressure on unwed mothers who are single. You don't get the same look if there's a single parent that's a father, right? Or if they were widowed, but if you knew that they were going to be a single mother by choice, right? And I say by choice not really because it's choice, but something happened between the father, or the father walked away, whatever it may be. But they chose to keep their child and raise that child, like I did. We get a lot of hate. Now, again, not the same amount that would have happened in the 1940s and the 1950s, but there is still a tremendous amount of society where people pressure, people don't support, and they would rather support hopeful adoptive parents instead of keeping families together. And these agencies are preying on that. These agencies are like, oh, hey, you're pregnant? Let me send you ads now. We can track you through Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, your Google. Oh, you're impoverished? Let me just put these signs up. In fact, let me put up signs in your neighborhood, in impoverished neighborhoods, because you know that they're going to be struggling. There are people who are so desperate to adopt who go up to pregnant people and say, oh, you're in need? I would be happy to adopt your baby. Or they do this on the internet. And I'm not kidding. Like, this is actually I've seen comments like this. Right? I've seen it on the internet. I haven't seen it in person, but I have heard stories. And people are just okay with that. Oh, a stranger comes up to you. Oh, you know what? You're impoverished. Guess what? I'll take your baby. No, you won't. No, you won't. They pressure the family members, they pressure the pregnant person. They continuously call and email and put ads in your face, and then they make people say, hey, you won't be as good of a mother to your child because you can't give it as many opportunities because you are in a temporary crisis. But hey, this family happens to have a little bit more money than you, so your baby should be with them. They're just lying all around because they just want the money.
Been described as adoption tourism, and Utah is an epicenter. Much of the business begins online.
That first page is going to be all the paid ads that are targeted towards that region. So get paid for adoption, geocode, Columbia, South Carolina.
Kelsey Vandervliet Ranyard works for a nonprofit that tracks agencies and brokers that solicit pregnant women around the country.
In my work, we survey what's happening in the Google advertisements. We conduct Google searches from all over the country, from different states and regions, to understand what is popping up in women's Google searches when they look for adoption help.
She had firsthand experience as she had placed one of her own children for adoption.
Choose adoption, free, safe housing for you and your family. Money for bills, food, and more.
And this is where it becomes an issue. They are targeting people in crisis, families in crisis. And instead of, they'll be like, oh, we'll give you $5,000. And that's at best, right? But the gotcha is, if you don't give up that child, and we're going to see this later in the video, right? If you don't give up that child, you either have to pay it back right? Oh, but we fed you. Oh, we housed you. Oh, we paid, your medical bills. Mind you, most of it was Medicaid. You have to pay it back because you didn't follow through with the contract and the adoption. By the way, it is illegal for a biological parent to be forced to pay it back even if they kept their child. That is a law. The money towards the biological parent is considered a gift to help. And if they don't relinquish their child, guess what? Too fucking bad. You helped a family stay together, and you should be proud of that. I know that sucks because you're so desperate to have a baby, but you shouldn't be trafficking children. And this is the caveat. Adoption agencies will target impoverished families, like I was saying, and then make you feel bad for wanting to change your mind, as we will see.
A lot of times these women are coming from unstable housing situations, financial instability, pretty deep poverty. They could live down the street from an adoption agency that's licensed in their state and can provide social services to them, but that agency is pretty unlikely to actually appear in the ads because an overwhelming amount of those ads, those paid ads, are coming from Utah adoption agencies.
In some cases, she said, the ads are not even directly from the agencies themselves, but from unlicensed brokers working on their behalf.
This is an unlicensed intermediary in Virginia, and their job is to get you to move to Utah, convince you to move to Utah, facilitate your relocation, and as soon as you arrive, you are handed off to your agency. Typically, adoption would be finding families for children who need them. But what private domestic infant adoption has really become is finding children for families who want them.
And she's incorrect for either. The point of adoption, the idea of, I should say, was for them to find a family for a child in need. Here's the thing. Adoption, especially in the United States, has never been about that. It has always been, even in colonial times, right? Long before adoption laws were a thing in 1855 in Massachusetts, okay? I'm gonna talk about the history. There have been people, quote unquote, adopting, and I say that because obviously adoption laws didn't exist, but they were taking in children. And it was really meant not to help the child in need, but usually, and not always, but usually, they're truly adopting babies, right? It was meant because the couple was, quote unquote, infertile and was struggling, and they could then take a child. I'm going to give you some examples, and I've talked about this on my YouTube channels. I've talked about this in other places, and we are going to read some books later in the year. I'm planning all of that out. But we're going to talk about a lot of significant people, whether they were good or they were bad, whether they're adoptive parents, bio parents, adoptees, etc. And I want to mention some adoptees right now in this moment. So number one is Sir Governor William Phips, who was the governor of what would then become Massachusetts. I should say what would later become Massachusetts, because he was governor of the region of this where Salem and Boston was at the time. He took in a child related to him. I don't remember if it was his sister or his wife's sister, but she had a baby. They took the child in, and I will give credit because the child then changed his name at 18 and said, I did this because my adoptive parents were so good to me that I wanted to share their name. That is cool. They also had contact with the biological mother. We had Dorothy Good, who was only 2 and the youngest accused of witchcraft, also during that time. Her father abandoned her and her siblings and her mother. I believe her youngest, the baby died, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and her mother was hung. She was released. Again, she was only two to three when she was imprisoned for being a witch, right during the 1962 craziness of Salem witch trials, and then was put into indentured servitude because that was the quote unquote foster care of the time. She became an adult. She still struggled with poverty. She was in and out of the poorhouses, which is jail for being poor. Crazy, I know, but it exists. She then had two children who were then also placed in indentured servitude. And based off their age or based off their genders, if you were a girl, it was 23 years. If you were a boy, 25 years to pay off your quote unquote debt to society. They then also struggled. Also, during that time, one of the accusers, Abigail Williams, was also an adoptee. She went to go live with relatives. She was a little bit older. She went to live with her cousin and her uncle. And I don't know, I gotta do like a lot more research, but I'm pretty sure it's because her parents got sick or were killed during the French Indian War. So, yes, there were things that were happening, like war and a lot of people dying from illnesses as well. So yes, children were taken in. Does that mean it was necessarily a good thing? No, right? Then we're going to fast forward a little bit. Okay, a little bit over 100 years to Andrew Jackson. Yes, the one that became president. He, quote unquote, adopted two children. One of them, Andrew Jackson Jr., who was a twin. We are going to read all about Andrew Jackson Jr. and Lyncoya later this year. I'm thinking we'll start the book in mid-October into November. That'll be like our book for the month and a half. Because Lyncoya is an indigenous adoptee. So, first of all, Andrew Jackson Jr. was taken in by his uncle, right, as his own, given his name, and I mean, Andrew Jackson, the president, was a piece of shit, and his biological descendant, I guess, would be, or he's not his child, but related to, also an adoptee, was just the same way. He was told that bigotry was okay. But I will say, when you read the book, you kind of have a somewhat feel for Andrew Jackson Jr. because he didn't quite fit in with his adoptive family and he didn't quite fit in with his biological because it was a different class system. His biological parents and siblings, mind you, he was the youngest of the siblings, but also a twin, didn't understand the same lifestyle and he didn't understand theirs. So there was a whole thing, and yes, he did get to know his siblings and his biological parents. Then we have Lyncoya Jackson, who was also adopted by Andrew Jackson, who later became president. It was during one of the wars, and he killed Lyncoya's mother, found him supposedly, and I say supposedly, I don't really trust anything Andrew Jackson says. He tried to give the child to the tribe, and they said no, no, no. And so then he took the child in and kind of used Lyncoya, be like, they're not all the S word, right? But then told Lyncoya, hey, you have to assimilate to being white. You're no longer indigenous. And it was extremely harmful to Lyncoya, who also died at a very young age. A lot of adoptees do. So there has been a notorious history of adoption, especially in the United States, even prior to the United States even being a country, being specifically targeted for those that are struggling to have biological children. Again, this is before official adoption laws in 1855 in Massachusetts were even put on the books. And while safe external care already existed as forms of like kinship, fictive kin, guardian styles, kind of like what they actually did, they were still targeted because of the infertile. Crazy, I know, but it was never in the best interest of the child.
And because that's been the focus, it's become incredibly transactional.
I told you guys would be sick of me. All right, it only became transactional in the way that they are talking about with money because of Georgia Tann, who was running a home in Missouri. She then got kicked out because of the harmful practices she was doing. She moved to Tennessee, to Memphis, and then was running a home for Tennessee's children. She was doing foster care and adoption. It wasn't separated at the time. This is kind of like when orphanages still existed in the United States. They were phased out after her death in 50s and 60s. And although Georgia Tann could have legally been practicing adoption, right? Adopting children out, she was not. She knew that she was getting away with things. She was inspired by Charles Loring Brace, who created the orphan trains and then created baby breeding farms, which basically was farms along the way to these other farms, like smaller areas, were taking care of younger babies that couldn't physically work. And that's what really inspired a lot of this stuff, right? That was the end of Civil War into 1910s. She really started 1910 to 1950s. She was practicing a little bit before, but it was around 1910 in Tennessee that she started. She got caught in 1950 when she was dying of cancer. She died. She was never held accountable. Tennessee then, quote unquote, investigated, found that it was fraudulent, but said, A, we're not going to mess with the adoptive parents because a lot of them are celebrities or politicians. We don't want to remove the children, even though they were literally kidnapped off streets. She also murdered 30 babies in a span of a month. You know, you guys could read The Baby Thief, which again I have on my channel. But you know, we're just gonna make all of these fraudulent adoptions now legal. And we're gonna see this again later in this documentary. Yeah. And this was all because Georgia Tann made it into a now $25 billion+ industry. Then she made it into a $1 million. That was the 1950s. It was a million. Prior to that, it was nothing. She was only getting money from the government. But she was giving back to the government. She was paying people. She was paying politicians and doctors and judges and all sorts of people. And that's how she got away with it. And this is still happening under the guise of lobbying.
One woman who was drawn into this process was Tia Goins. Her experience began back in 2018 in Michigan after she had given birth. She was 20 and facing homelessness as winter approached.
What gave you the idea to consider adoption?
I mean, I was adopted, so that's what kind of gave me the idea, because I was adopted.
So can you walk me back through how you decided to look up an agency? What happened? Can you tell us what?
I just was having all these different emotions in my head, like, I don't want to be in a shelter with her. So literally the first thing popped in my head was adoption. So I just looked up adoption agencies. First thing I typed in Google search, adoption agencies. And the first link that popped up, I clicked the number and I called it. And a lady named Flossie Green answered. And she told me that they would give me $1,000 if I go through with the adoption. So I told her just to give me a couple days to let me think about it, let me figure out if that's what I wanted to do. She called back the next day.
This is so sad. So she was 18, she was adopted, and she was in a shelter. And it makes me think, where were her adoptive parents? What help did she get as an adoptee? They promised her $1,000, and that felt like maybe that was worth giving up your child, but they didn't offer much more, right? They didn't offer mental health issues or trying to get up on her feet, other resources, how to get a job, how to get a home. Like, there was nothing. And then she said, "Give me a few days." You could have waited 48 hours. Didn't even do that. Didn't even wait 24 hours. Mind you, this is the only adoptee that was interviewed during this time that they put on the documentary. Maybe there was more people, we don't know. But per their editing, this is the only adoptee. And it's only to talk about her experience as a biological mother. Because unfortunately, there are adoptees that also then face being a biological parent and having to relinquish, or are so rose-colored glasses and don't recognize the harm, and then also maybe become an adoptive parent. Not always, but it's harmful because they also didn't get the help. And it's frustrating. Now, of course, that's not every adoptive parent. Like, sometimes there's foster to adopt, and it's the only choice for the child because there was a termination for whatever reason and they couldn't be reunified. And I guess in some ways it's better to have an adoptee take in the child or someone that went through foster care so they can kind of relate in some ways, as long as they're trauma informed. But at the same time, the laws are in place and violate our human rights. Now, foster care to adoption is a little bit different. They do get a little bit more access to their paperwork if they can get access. Again, big if. But the issue is, are these people trauma informed? The issue is, are they getting the help that they need? Are they truly being told the truth? And this isn't just towards the bio parents, right? The adoptive parents are also lied to. They're not told the reality. They are so desperate for a baby that they don't seek therapy for their infertility. And I'm not saying everyone's infertile, let me make that clear. But oftentimes it's either very religious, or they have a very saviorism point of view, or it's because of their infertility. And none of them actually go through therapy and actually get trauma informed. I mean, some get trauma informed, but these agencies don't do a good enough job. They very much brush it under the rug. They ignore the adoptees. And then they lie to each party, right? They lie to the adoptive parents. Oh yeah, we're helping the biological family. They're getting the help that they need, the medical help. They're getting counseling, blah, blah, blah. And then the same thing goes with the biological parents. Of course, they're going to be trauma informed. You were promised maybe an open adoption, right? There'll be maybe contact in the future, so forth. If they even offer mental health, maybe it's one time, and then God forbid you're telling the truth. God forbid you're telling about your bad experience that you regret it. Forget, you lose your resources. And then if you were to even change your mind, you also lose your resources, which we will see.
Within 24 hours, she said the woman from the ad, Flossie Green, had arranged for her and her 3-month-old baby to be flown to Salt Lake City, where the owner of an adoption agency was waiting.
Hi, my name's Sandy Quick. I am the owner, founder, and director of Brighter Adoptions. We are a licensed child placing agency located in Utah, and we serve women from all over the United States who are wanting to do an adoption.
Goins had been passed on to Sandy Quick, who brought her to a nearby restaurant where she met a couple who'd come from out of state to adopt her baby. But later that night, back at the hotel room, she said she began having second thoughts.
I just kept hearing something that just kept telling me to go back home, go back home, go back home, go back home. So I called Sandy. Sandy didn't answer the phone. So I texted her. I'm like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. I think I want to go back home. And she's like, okay, I'm in labor with another mother right now. I'll give you a call back in a second.
She said the call never came, and the next morning, she said Quick's agency presented her with the adoption paperwork.
It happened too fast. Everything was just too fast. The lady said, I'm going to read these off and, you sign where I point. Oh, she was reading. She pointed. I signed.
Once.
And they don't find this problematic. They don't find this problematic. Yes, in this case, Tia was 3 months postpartum, so a little bit longer than a lot of adoptions. However, she was young. She didn't understand. She had no representation. She had no access to resources. And she said she was having second thoughts. And instead of, hey, how can I help reassure you? Or what resources do you need? Let me get you in contact with other people. How can we help you keep your family together? Right? Which, if you weren't about human trafficking and you were actually in the best interest of the child, you would find ways to do that. Instead, oh my gosh, you're thinking about adoption. Let me throw you in right away so people aren't thinking, they're not having enough time to research. Oh my gosh, you're having second thoughts. Let me rush in. Have no representation. You just sign here, not explaining a thing. And yeah, part of it would be like if she had a lawyer, even if they were pro bono, right? Would they be in the best interest of Tia as a biological mother? If the Brighter Adoptions or any other agency was, getting in contact? Probably not, right? Probably not. And this is the issue that we are facing because a lot of these lawyers, it's not just lawyers, let me just say that, but a lot of them don't actually care about the interest of the child. They just care about the money, right? And then we have judges who, oh yeah, the adoption's great. Oh yeah, this is credible. Meanwhile, they get a $4,000 bonus per Congress. I think I read it was like 2019, 2020. I know it was set in Chosen Children by Lori Carangelo, another book that we've previously read, and you should go listen. That's not for me to like toot my own horn that we read books here. But my point is, do your research, right? And she's also young. So you have an 18-year-old entering into a lifelong contract for a baby that can never get out of that contract in the interests of the adoptive parents. And it's incredibly predatory. And people are not recognizing that.
She signed, there was no turning back. While some states give birth mothers 30 days to reconsider even after they've placed, at the time, Utah did not. The whole transaction took 3 days.
Hurt it really bad. To go back to the same airport I came out of with a baby without a baby.
Before she left Salt Lake, she said Quick handed her an envelope with $4,000 in cash. Back then, Utah had no limits on the amount of cash payments to birth mothers, as long as the agency said it was covering what's considered reasonable costs for pregnancy and immediate postpartum care.
She told me, try not to spend it all in one place, or use it wisely. That's what she told me, use it wisely.
We reached out to both Flossie Green and Sandy Quick, but neither of them would agree to talk to us. Authorities have never charged them with any crimes or prevented them from operating. When I first wrote about Tia Gowen's story in 2024, Quick told me in an email that she couldn't discuss specific cases, but that her agency takes any indication of hesitation from a birth mother very seriously. And she said they'd never take consent from a mother who did not fully understand the ramifications. For years after the adoption, Gowen's pursued the adopted parents for contact with the child. so much so that a court issued a restraining order. In a statement, the adoptive mother said that her daughter is now a bright, healthy, extraordinary little girl, and that the adoption was voluntary. She said the adoption industry needs federal oversight and uniform standards.
Some things I want to mention. First of all, the adoptive parent claims it was voluntary, but she wasn't there when the biological parent signed away, so she doesn't actually know. Let's also mention that she benefited from this situation, so of course she's not gonna wanna, give up their child. Also, if she actually cared about the best interest of the child, she would allow contact. First of all, like I was saying earlier in this video, a PAC agreement, which is usually done at the same time as the relinquishment, and I'm not saying that Tia had a PAC agreement, right? But if there was one done, it's supposed to kind of outline like, hey, it's gonna be quote unquote open. Obviously things are gonna vary, but how often it's gonna be, what that's gonna look like, and to what age. Now, most of these PAC agreements go till age 5, although adoptive parents will close, the majority of them will close it by age 1, 90%. 9 more do close it around age 5. However, like I was saying earlier, they are not legally binding. So even if a PAC agreement existed, the adoptive parent could close at any time. And that is predatory. You are lying to them. Also, again, in the best interest of the child, if you actually gave a damn, you would keep it open, make sure that there was contact, make sure that there was trauma-informed therapy, right, for you as an adoptive parent and for your child, but also hopefully the biological parent is also getting that. And you guys can come to an understanding and put the adoptee first. Something that I am very grateful that both my adoptive parents and my bio mom did, okay? Again, there might be a time where the adoptee decides they don't want contact. Understand, go by that. But in the essence of a PAC agreement, right, it should still be open. The whole general idea. Now, if the parent, the bio parent, I should say, is truly unsafe, at what would that be considered? Right? Is it because they went to jail? And what was the reason they went to jail? Because often, as we have found recently from a Stanford study, my apologies, it wasn't Stanford, it was Winston-Salem State University. This was a study that came out earlier this year that they worked through the last couple of years. I did participate as an adoptee, and it did find that if you read it, you can pause. It says in the abstract that adoptees and first mothers are significantly more likely to attempt suicide 35 times for the adoptee and 37.7 times for the first mother. Also towards abuse in alcohol, display hypersexual behaviors, and restrict their eating compared to their peers. While first mothers have a lower expectancy and are more likely to die by suicide than women who did not lose their children to adoption, adoptees frequently struggle with their identity and sense of belonging. They express experiencing trauma from their separation from their first mothers, regardless of the quality of the adoptive parents. So we'll go through this another time. There was also another study that I want to talk about for a quick minute. So the study that I'm also now mentioning as well, you can find this on PubMed, that adoption and trauma risk recovery and the lived experience of adoption. Now I do want to note that this came out in 2023, so a couple years ago, and this was done by David Brzezinski. This name should be known to you because he has been known in the adoption industry. he was part of the group of people who said that adoption is trauma. Then he went to go work somewhere else. I forget where he worked originally. Went to go work for like adoption lobbying it. Kind of backtracked and now is saying it again. So keep that in mind. Yeah, we are currently also reading The Psychology of Adoption, which I have to get back to, but he did help write several adoption related books and talking about the issues with adoption. So, with that being said, the abstract in this, I'm going to just read a little bit, so you can always go look for yourself. He said, although a very heterogeneous group, adopted persons may present developmental mental health problems of a varying severity. Pre-placement adversity and trauma have often been linked to these problems. So remember generational trauma. It is also suggested that adoption itself is a psychological trauma predisposing the individual to emotional difficulties. Continuing on, the article examines the links between early adversity, trauma, and adoption. We begin by defining what adoption is and then describing the way in which pre-placement adversity can undermine neurobehavioral and interpersonal functioning, increasing the risk for long-term psychological difficulties. Then, we examine children's recovery when placed in stable adoptive homes. Finally, we explore adoption as a lived experience, highlighting contextual and developmental factors that facilitate the person's positive or negative attributions about being adopted, leading to varying patterns of emotional adjustments. Their conclusion, although pre-placement adversity increases adopted individuals' risk for maladjustment, the human brain and behavior are malleable, and placement in a nurturing adoptive home often facilitates recovery from early adversity, while significant heterogeneity in the extent of recovery within and across domains of functioning. While there's no evidence that early adoption is a trauma for the individual, again, he's already said that it was previously, whatever, ongoing negative life circumstances, attachment difficulties, and developmentally mediated attributions about adoption can undermine the person's self-esteem, identity, relationships, any sense of well-being. So, again, we've already talked about 2 more recent studies on adoption. But we get ignored, right? It's not a problem. It's in the best interest of the child, right? Yeah, okay.
I spoke to dozens of people while reporting this story. Birth mothers, adoptive parents, adoptees, agency owners, government officials, and law enforcement. And I combed through thousands of pages of adoption-related documents. What I found was a patchwork system where states like Utah, with historically lax rules, have allowed brokers and agencies to profit, and critics say often take advantage of birth mothers and adoptive parents.
Why would adoptive parents want to come here from elsewhere to adopt?
A lot of times they get led here by their consultant, and the draw of it is just too good. The idea that they could have a baby in just a few months, I think that's very attractive to desperate people.
Keyword, desperate people. They're not thinking about the best interest of the child or what harm that they could then perpetuate, and they don't want to reflect on that. They don't want to reflect that they are participating in a human trafficking industry only because they want a baby so desperately that they don't want to seek out other ways to mitigate the harm, to go to therapy. But they're so desperate that they are willingly to pay thousands of dollars to purchase a baby.
Adoptions are easy, maybe quicker, seemingly more efficient in terms of bureaucratic red tape. Essentially, Utah has become a location for private adoption forum shopping.
In recent months, the state has moved to tighten its adoption laws in response to mounting criticism from birth mothers and their advocates.
So this is the bill that they are referencing. FYI, it was recent. There was some changes in 2025. Then this new bill was introduced in 2025. Sorry, there's a newer bill in 2024. They then changed in 2025, and this is where we're at. Just want to make this clear. We'll go through that a whole nother day, but I did want to give a heads up if anyone wanted to go do research.
Some disillusioned adoptive parents have also been expressing concerns.
It's been hard to wrap my mind around what we played into. I touted how beautiful our adoption, how easy our adoption was. Of course it was easy. Easy doesn't mean good. So yeah, there's a level of guilt that I've had to work through.
This woman adopted a baby in Utah in 2019. She was steered there by a private consultant, another type of unlicensed intermediary, and started going through the process again a few years later.
So this is basically what we would receive as information about a mom who's pregnant and was considering adoption. So this one we got in March 2022. It says she has been here before and placed a child for adoption in February of 2020 and June of 2021. So that's 3 babies in less than 3 years, all placing.
What did this say to you?
I mean, she's either not receiving support to heal, to have access to affordable healthcare, affordable contraceptives, or she's become accustomed to whatever lifestyle and support the agency's providing her and is being sold on doing that. It's telling me, she's very young and it feels exploitative. I mean, she's continuing to get pregnant, give birth in place.
She told me she and her husband were so concerned about the process, they ultimately decided to adopt through an agency in their home state of Georgia.
Do y'all get it? Why I want to scream so bad? Like, they're almost there. They get the point, but then it still goes over their head. It is exploitive. You realize this in the agencies in Utah, but cannot recognize this as the industry total. And you don't recognize that you have continued to play into the industry by adopting again. Make it make sense.
By spring of 2022, my husband and I remember saying to him, I don't think that we can adopt again in this way because I don't think I could live with it.
Many women I have spoken to who were in Utah, who once they did place, received cash payments.
That feels gross to me, to be handing someone a lump of cash. The point of birth mother expenses are to provide the support she needs to have a healthy and safe pregnancy, not to give you $5,000 cash to go and do what you will, not to be an inducement to place your child. How does that not end up feeling like selling a baby? I don't know a single adoptive parent who wants to buy a baby. I would never want my children to feel like they were bought and sold.
And yet, that's exactly what it is because of Georgia Tan. And you guys don't recognize that. You don't want your adoptive children to feel bought and sold, but what did you do? You paid thousands of dollars to purchase a child through quote unquote services. And you guys don't realize that? That money could have gone to help multiple families stay together. But you were so desperate to have a baby, and this isn't just to this couple, this is to every single, adoptive parent that goes through private infant adoption, right? Whether it's through an agency or not, you're paying to break a family apart. Majority, and I say 99.9% of biological mothers don't want to relinquish their child. And you guys don't realize that. You're so desperate to have a baby that you're not understanding 2 + 2 = 4. If it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, and it looks like a duck. It's a duck. That's exactly what it is.
One of the reasons Utah became such an adoption hotspot is due to how agencies have used cash and housing offers as incentives for vulnerable women in other states. Ashley Mitchell placed her own child for adoption and later became an advocate for reform.
And I just kept getting messages, and you need to see this, and have you heard about this, and do you know about this contract, and do you know about this apartment?
I met with her in 2025 when she showed us some local apartments that agencies had used to house pregnant women from out of state.
So this was the first apartment that we heard of. I mean, look how broken down, like all the blinds and everything. Oh, yeah.
She said she'd talked to birth mothers who'd lived in these kinds of apartments and told her that there were consequences for anyone who changed their minds about going through with an adoption.
If a woman wanted to parent, they would be evicted immediately. Because if they were brought here for the sole purpose of adoption, they're not going to pay their bills anymore. And this is like you carrying your baby out of the hospital, we're packing up your in your apartment.
The woman had reached out to a Facebook group of birth mothers who rallied to help her.
And so I just said, well, let's go get her. This is like crazy. This is so messed up. I wish I was surprised that this was happening. I'm very angry, but I'm just like, pick a day. It's just a normal Wednesday in Utah.
First of all, Saving Our Sisters really does help. That's not who she is part of as far as we know. I think it's really important that you have a group of people that are willing to help you. And Saving Our Sisters does a really fantastic job. I know they can't do it for everyone, but I just want to put out that resource. But also, when she said it's just another Wednesday, just another day, exactly how I feel as an adoptee, especially how I feel as an advocate. Like, nothing shocks me anymore.
Which is so messed up. So making sure this is the right address.
We filmed as she went to see the woman at a home they'd found for her, her newborn, and 2 toddlers to stay in while she figured out next steps.
Hi. How are you?
Good.
It's so nice to meet you.
Yes.
Hey, beautiful. Hi. How are you? Can I hold that? So I brought some gifts.
Okay. It's so hurtful.
She'd come to Utah from a state where abortion is illegal. She had no job and no stable place to live.
I live here. I'm born and raised here.
Oh, really?
I placed my son for adoption 18 years ago.
Okay.
She'd gone online looking for help and found an ad from Flossie Green, who put her in touch with Denise Garza, the owner of the Love and Light Adoption Agency. She said Garza offered her a free apartment with a playground and a pool, good medical care, and money for food and clothing. But once she was there, she began to have second thoughts about placing the baby.
As my stomach got bigger and just my emotions were just really getting in the way, like for me. And, you know, at times I felt like I was scared to say, hey, I don't want to do it anymore. Yeah. It's getting to the end and I don't know if I owe something. I just felt pressured all the way around. Like I just felt trapped, isolated, and I was just ready to run off and I didn't know where to go. It just feels like I've been hit by a train several times.
It's wild.
And it's I don't even know what to say no more.
I'm sorry.
I switched.
Trade you. You're like, oh. Okay.
Yeah. I never would have thought I would be in this situation, like for real. Going back to square one.
The woman was scheduled to fly back to her home state the next day.
What a mess. God, that's so up.
After leaving, Mitchell called us to talk about the situation.
I'll call them real quick. There's just no way. They just make it impossible. is she supposed to do? Lose her kid or lose her support? Like, hey.
How are you? Tell us, how did it go?
I mean, I don't like as good as those things go, I guess. Like, I mean, she's so, I'll bet, it would not, I would just tell you it would not shock me in any way if she goes back to an agency to place. She's got to get on an airplane tomorrow or not. She's either going to pack up her and get on that airplane with her new baby, or she's going to go back to the agency, because those are her two options.
The woman ended up returning home with her newborn. But 6 weeks later, she reached back out to Denise Garza at Love and Light for help. When I got in touch with the woman again, she told me that Garza had flown to her, arranged the adoption, and then gave her $5,000 in cash apps and gift cards. Denise Garza wouldn't agree to an interview, but has disputed the woman's account. I'd started reporting on her 2 years earlier. Although there weren't any criminal charges, in 2018, Utah revoked her license for 5 years after regulators cited her for violations, including failing to provide medical information to adopted parents, falsifying forms, and charging for medical expenses paid for by Medicaid. At the time,
So, this is really disappointing. One, this birth mother, right, or at the time she was a potential birth mother, she hadn't quite made the choice. And then she had her baby, was with the baby for what, at least 7 weeks, if not longer, and decided to place. One, we don't know if she was going through postpartum. It did sound like she wanted to keep her child, but already had 2 older children that were toddlers. She had no support system in Utah where they brought her. Of course, they're trying to, isolate her. And she didn't really get the help she needed. She clearly wanted to raise her child, but had a lack of support. How is, and I'm just asking those that are listening for the first time, how is that in any way not a coercive and abuse of power? Let's also mention that Denise Garza and Folly, whatever her name is, how, oh God, I like losing my words here. You claim, oh, well, my business wasn't shut down, but I was lying on, I was being a fraud. But I'm not selling babies. We're just doing placements. I'm tired of the bullshit. I really am. Like, it's so in your face, and yet still people don't understand. Because it's a coercion, because it's about power, because it's about money, and they don't actually care about the individuals. They don't care who it affects because it doesn't affect them. They don't care about the adoptees. They just know that they can make money off of selling the idea of, hey, you can have a family. Here's a way you can adopt. You can spend 20, 30, 40, 50 plus $1,000 to have a family of your own. Oh my gosh, you want to save a child? Oh, let's do this. Oh, you're religious? You are called by God to do this. In no way, if God even existed, and I'm not putting down anyone's religion, just hear me out, they would not support this. They wouldn't. And if we even want to get technical with Jesus, right, like if Jesus existed in the way that it says in the Bible, Jesus would be a step-parent adoptee. Jesus would be an adoptee. There are several adoptees mentioned in, the Bible, not just Moses, but also Jesus. There are different types of adoptions. He would never support this if Jesus was the Son of God or God whatever. You guys get the point. It's just so frustrating.
She told me in an email that she was very sorry for the mistakes she'd made in the past and was committed to mothers' safe and healthy pregnancies and running her agency at the highest ethical and administrative standards. In addition to Garza and Quick, a few other adoption agencies in Utah also regularly bring women in from out of state. Donna Pope runs one of them and agreed to talk to me.
Oh, is this your map you were telling me about?
This is the map, and this is also, this is our wall of fame. This is this year.
Her nonprofit agency, Heart to Heart, arranges about 90 adoptions a year. She said roughly a quarter of them are with out-of-state birth mothers who've traveled to Utah.
Every one of these has this amazing story.
Some agencies here are for-profit. And I know you know about them. Some of them have come under scrutiny. Sandy Quick and Denise Garza, who run for-profit entities, have raised a lot of eyebrows nationally. And you are aligned with them. How do you think some of that scrutiny reflects on the adoption industry in Utah overall?
Yeah, no. And I like Sandy and I like Denise. I think they're wonderful people and I care about them a lot. Since it's become more scrutinized here, we've increased our conversations with each other. And we have talked a little bit more about, well, why are you choosing to do it that way? Why are you choosing to do it this way? I don't feel like I'm in a position to tell people how to run their business. I don't feel like that is my job. I certainly am very, as you can tell, vocal about some of the principles that I think are important. One is that you treat women with dignity, with respect, and empower them and try to make sure that you follow what their needs are and try to fulfill them.
Okay, so this adoption director who is for a nonprofit, so no, she's not, necessarily banking in the money through adoptive parents. However, nonprofits still profit, right? They still get donations, they still pay themselves, but you're still benefiting off of trafficking children under the guise of adoption. And then you go on to say, well, I like these two people despite that they have been really harmful to biological mothers and adoptees. So you like human traffickers because you are one yourself. Oh, but we should benefit the biological, like their needs, and what does that look like? We're going to get into that in a minute because she is going to deep dive, but it's like, are you not looking in the mirror? Because you're not. You are very much just as bad as they are, just with a little bit less money.
Pope has never had any legal or regulatory sanctions that stopped her from operating her adoption business. And as for out-of-state adoptions specifically, she said they fulfill an important need.
This population of women are oftentimes extremely vulnerable. They don't have a lot of power. If they need to get up and move, let them get up and move. If they need additional help from someone else that's not their neighbor, get them additional help from someone else that's not their neighbor. Empower them to get the services they need, wherever that might be.
But one thing I learned was that sometimes women get cash payments. What do you think of that, and do you think that can be seen as coercive?
Yeah, no, I think that's something people bring up. Let's first of all, we can go to the law part about it. The law says you can't buy a baby. That's the law. Okay, but can you help this birth mom? Well, sure. Help her. Well, how? How can I help her? Well, help her with her pregnancy-related expenses. That would include housing, clothing, her phone. They always need a phone. Transportation, utilities, medical care, legal help if they need counseling. Well, that costs money.
How do you make sure these payments don't function as an inducement rather than legitimate support?
I sometimes think that we are goofy in how we think about this, because some states we say, don't you have an abortion? But then we say, but don't get any help, or it's seen as an inducement. Well, come on, you guys, be fair with her. She needs help, and we've got to give them the ability to live during the time that they're pregnant so that they can give life to that child.
And you can do just that, just like Saving Our Sisters, which is an actual nonprofit organization run by biological mothers to help families be preserved. So if you actually gave a fucking damn, you would support organizations like Saving Our Sisters. But you don't, because really, oh no, we have to support them through their pregnancy. Oh no, we have to give them a home and food and clothing, basic human rights, right? But you're not setting them up for long time help. You're also requiring families to have ads and GoFundMes, and I mean the adoptive parents, not the biological parents, right here. And for Denise Garza, not this lady, right? But they're lying about paying for the Medicaid and the medical bills. Again, they're using that as an incentive to take the child. Oh, here, we'll pay for your bills and you give us your child. Right? It's kind of like Rapunzel, where, oh, the greens, everything but the greens, right? Like, what was it, Into the Woods? Where the wife of it wasn't the baker. Yeah, the wife of the original baker, right? Not the son who then later had a child and wanted to have a child. But ooh, my goodness. Into the Woods, she was cursed because she kept stealing the greens from the garden, and then the witch said, hey, I'm going to take your baby in payment. And that then later became Rapunzel in Into the Woods. I am not trying to give everything away. That is definitely something that we can talk about in the future, how media portrays it. But it's like kind of the same way that Dolly Parton just joked with Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. Oh my gosh, you're married. I'm going to take your first baby now. Now, look, I know it's a joke, but it's the same bullshit. It's the same concept. Oh, we want to help them. We want to support them. We want to give them resources. But in return, you're going to give us your most precious thing, a human being, a child. And you guys still don't recognize that that is human trafficking, even with nonprofit? Because it's not actually benefiting the child, and it's not benefiting the birth mom. We've already talked about some of the more recent studies, right? There are plenty of studies out there for well over 50 years, if not longer. And even in the last 5 years, right? Since 2021, there have been plenty of studies that shown that this is not in the best interest of the child. So I really, really hate when people go, but they're better off. It's a better opportunity. No, the fuck it's not. No, it's not.
But there are also critics of the practice within the industry itself. Tara Romney Barber is program director for a nonprofit child welfare organization that provides family services, including a small number of adoptions, just 2 last year. They don't work with mothers from out of state, and they charge about $20,000, a fraction of the more than $80,000 that some agencies have charged.
Yeah, I mean, Utah is known as being a family-friendly state. That is a reputation I think my state really enjoys having, and we hold that. That's a core value for our state. And in that, we want to make sure that families can be created in all kinds of ways, adoption being one of those.
So you have recently been very vocal about your concerns surrounding what's happening today in Utah adoptions. Can you lay out for us what's happening and why you have raised your voice?
Yeah, one of the things that I've been really concerned about is we were getting reports from community partners about the increase in the number of adoptions they were seeing, where the adoptive parents and the birth parents were coming to Utah from other states solely for the purpose of the adoption, and then they would both, fly back or go back to wherever they came from. And the partner had some real concerns about the things that she was seeing, and she was talking to me about it, and they were matching up with some of the things that I was learning about what was happening in the adoption world. And the more, thinking about it was, what can we do to maybe have our voices heard, that we don't necessarily agree with that type of practice, that it can be predatory in our opinion, my opinion, and that people deserve to be protected throughout what can be a really vulnerable process of adoption.
She told me about one local hospital where there were as many as 3 adoptions a week, almost all of them with impoverished women from out of state.
Why are we recruiting women in another state to come to Utah solely for the purpose of adoption? And why are we bringing adoptive families who are not residents of Utah to Utah solely for the purpose of this placement and this adoption? And it makes me go, well, why? Why aren't we doing these in their home states or where they are? Because what I think is when you remove a woman from her safety nets, whether she has friends or family in that home state, whether there are social supports or a job that she has there, if we're flying her to Utah, she is removed from all of those things. In my opinion, that creates a higher level of vulnerability and a higher chance of likelihood that that woman could be preyed upon in a vulnerable way or pressured to make a plan for adoption. And that doesn't sit right for me, because what I know is that there are ethical adoption agencies and ethical adoption services available in all 50 of our states.
And that's where she lost me. Okay, so I was pretty much with her. Yes, predatory. Yes, we need more resources. Yes, they should be given. However, all adoption agencies are unethical and problematic. Why, you might ask? Well, let's see. You are tearing apart families when 99.9% of biological mothers want to raise their child and are in a temporary crisis, right? Usually. And if they get those resources, they're then, again, we talked about this, have to give up their child. And sometimes their quote unquote support group, especially from family and friends, will put on that society pressure. Oh, but you're a single parent. Oh, but you won't be as good. Oh, but we're not going to really help you. So they're not really a support group. And I also want to mention, this is never in the best interest of the child. Also, by adoption laws, adoption violates adoptees' human rights. We are treated as second-class citizens. Even if a removal from a family, right, is necessary and they have to be placed in another location, whether that's kinship, fictive kin, guardianship, or like she did, really rarely, adoption, or like Australia, again, it's like two a year, right, where it is adoption, doesn't negate that our human rights are violated by the actual laws. That is unethical in itself. So you can never call an agency, as best as they try to be, ethical when they are participating in an unethical and immoral industry.
And that a woman could receive all of the services that she's provided in Utah, but in her home state where she's not removed from kind of her own natural support system. I think when women come from out of state, they don't always know what their rights are and could maybe potentially feel like, well, they've paid for my medical expenses, they've paid for my housing, I'm going to have to pay that back if I don't place. That can feel coercive.
A hospital employee eventually became so concerned that she wrote a report to the Utah Attorney General's office. In it, the employee named Denise Garza and Sandy Quick as the adoption providers and said that many of the women had mental health challenges. Several told staff they felt pressured to sign the adoption paperwork. In one instance, twins were separated. Ashley Mitchell saw the report and was hearing similar accounts from birth mothers themselves.
I think the most shocking thing that I have learned is how the women are being treated. Because the narrative of adoption and the advertisements and the language on the websites completely contradict what we're hearing. It floored me to see how that was actually being played out, and there was nothing supportive or beautiful or helpful in that at all.
And Ashley's absolutely correct, right? How people talk about adoption with these rose-colored glasses on, how they make believe that adoption really is, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. Oh, you're giving this child a better life. Oh, you rescued the child. Oh, sometimes we get you were so loved that they gave you up. Or we get, oh, well, your parents are horrible people. They gave you up. You must have been abused, or they would have thrown you in a dumpster. There's first of all so much mixed language, but also when you are new to the scene, right? I can definitely see why people are shocked when I say, "Hey, it's human trafficking. Hey, we lose human rights." And they're like, "Wait, what?" Now, sometimes I get, "Well, how?" And although, yes, I get tired of the weaponized incompetence, why can't you just go look it up yourself? It's not like we haven't had this on the internet for years, right? Not just from my account, but from other adoptees who have been speaking out on it. Adoptees long before I came along have been speaking out on that this is human trafficking. We got to stop this, right? Even during Georgia Tan's time, adoptees were speaking out, but they got ignored. Um, and I feel like I can kind of understand being new to the scene, especially when you don't know any better, right? Like it's very, like I said, rose-colored glasses, propaganda, brainwashing, right? They're going to lie to you. That of course they don't want you to know that it's human trafficking. But when you actually know the history of adoption and foster care, when you actually know the state laws, when you actually know the statistics, I guess for me, because I've been doing this for so long and I know way too much, and I'm telling you guys, I'm just not shocked that these conditions continue to happen. They didn't change. They may be hidden a little bit better, right? But they're being treated the same way that they were in the 1800s as they were in the 1900s as they are now. So it's really not that shocking to me. Um, it's devastating that we haven't really had a big, I don't know, I guess change, right? Yes, there have been some changes, right? Like in the 80s, open adoptions became more of a thing. Again, that's marketing ploy. Yes, we've had more books out. Yes, we have conferences. Yes, there are people using social media to speak out. Yes, we've seen a huge decrease in adoptions overall, like I showed you from the National Council for Adoption, which is great. But in the grand scheme of things, it's a drop in the bucket. And again, that is not to be like negative Nancy, right? Like, yes, those things are good. Yes, we are changing legislation. We'll see that in Utah, right? Even in this video, which is great. But again, it's a drop in the bucket. We have so much more work to do and so much more education, and it's not just the United States, it's worldwide. But I think it's important that we continue to discuss this and we just continue to hear from birth mothers as well as adoptees. Now, yes, I know I was complaining in the beginning, like, oh my gosh, adoptees weren't really spoken about, which is true. but the birth mothers often don't get enough say either. So I'm gonna step back and be like, hey, you know what, this is your thing, and I'm really glad that we are seeing more and more of that, because they don't get the recognition, they don't get heard. And while, yeah, sometimes there is rose-colored glasses, blah blah blah, right? It's good that we have a lot of birth parents speaking out.
The hospital employees report was given to the Utah State Legislature.
Next up on our agenda, we are going to hear about adoption tourism. Representative Hall, if you want to come up.
Thank you, Chair Gracious. Appreciate you, and thank you, committee, for...
Which convened hearings in the summer and fall of 2025.
We are an adoption-friendly state, and we want to protect that, but we also want the practice of adoption to be ethical for all the parties involved. So thank you again for your attention to this matter, and I'll let her.
In response to the mounting concerns, the legislature was considering new laws that would give mothers 72 hours to revoke consent, require all agencies to be registered as nonprofits and disclose where they are licensed, and guarantee birth mothers mental health therapy.
They're still supporting human trafficking, and to think that 3 days, 72 hours, is enough to change your mind when you may not have everything again set up, where you don't have the mental support, you don't have the financial support. And often, especially if you have like a C-section like I did, I didn't sleep for 3 days. You think 3 days is going to have a woman who would just went through 10 months of pregnancy in their right mind? Their hormones are still crazy. Now, yes, some parents struggle with postpartum, right? And may struggle with bonding. But to think that a lot of adoptive parents assume that, oh my gosh, if I adopt this baby from birth, they're going to be blank slates and we're going to bond, and then they come, not everyone, but a lot of parents then struggle and they're like, oh my gosh, my kid won't attach to me. They have RAD, right, which is reactive attachment disorder, and I honestly think it's a very bullshit disorder that is used for specifically adoptees. It can be used in other circumstances, but majority of the time it's used for adoptees and foster youth, and it puts the blame on the child, not recognizing the trauma they went through. And I really think that they should diagnose with CPTSD, which is child PTSD, right? Post-traumatic stress syndrome. And adoptees also don't get the mental health that they need. Adoptive parents don't go through the therapy before going into this. They're not well educated. Like, there's no federal oversight, right? Which, ridiculous in my mind. And sometimes when the agency does require it, right? Agency to agency, a lot of the times the education is bullshit and very adoptive parent focused and foster parent focused, instead of what's actually in the best interest, what comes from their perspective, what comes from the birth parent perspective, and not actually giving you the truth, but again, more propaganda, right? Oh my, what was it? Someone was telling me in their state, as a foster to adopt mom, she was saying that for her education, she was allowed to watch a movie like Annie, and that would qualify. Annie, which is incredibly problematic in itself for the foster to adoptees, right? For the orphanage time, right? The baby scoop era. And that was watching a movie, a problematic movie at that. Granted, it has great music, okay? But its qualifications for you to now be to be part of your licensing. No, I'm not hating on that particular mom. She recognized the harm. She did a lot more training. She like reached out to former foster youth and adoptees, which really should be the goal, right? She realized the goal of foster care was kinship. She realized that even though the child in her care could not be reunified for whatever reason. I don't know the specifics. I don't need to know the specifics. How do I best care for this child? How can I help this child through their trauma? What resources can I use to help this child? Their culture, their medical, all of this information, And she was like, how do I go about it? Like, and I will say, I do see an uptick in adoptive parents saying, like, I'm saving the information, I'm keeping multiple copies of paperwork, and that's great. That's fantastic, and I want to encourage that. And I want to encourage it in multiple places, also a digital version for your adoptee. But I also want you guys to fight on the front lines with us, right? Do the education. Talk to Congress, talk to senators, talk to people in your community, talk to the agencies, because this is ridiculous. Our laws are against adoptees. We cannot go into vital records and gain information about our own lives the same way that a biologically kept person can do. That is against our human rights, by the way. And our records get changed and sealed. But we love adoption, we just hate adoptees.
And I feel like
Among the adoption providers who testified was Sandy Quick, who defended her practices.
There's been negative media stories that specifically named me and my agency, and I was not allowed to speak on those because of confidentiality. We never once did anything wrong or anything unethical or anything illegal. I'm still in business, and I'm still not kidnapping children, and I'm still helping birth mothers, and I hope that I get to continue doing so.
After one of the hearings, I tried to speak to Sandy Quick, who was in the corridor with Denise Garza and Donna Pope.
Well, I'm here from PBS's Frontline, and I'm just wondering if you would have a moment now.
No, I don't owe PBS anything, and I don't have to answer to anybody except the Office of Licensing and my current clients.
By March 2026, the legislature would pass the proposed adoption reforms, though they left in place a controversial policy that makes it hard to undo adoptions even in cases of alleged fraud. Not long afterwards,
And are you surprised? They did this in 1953 when they found out that Georgia Tann was doing adoptions illegally. Mind you, she could have been licensed the entire time. Created fraudulent adoptions, created the private infant adoption where it is based around money, created the change in original birth certificates, right? Originally, you would get a certification of adoption, right, before she came along. There were some other things that she changed. And when Tennessee found out and did an investigation, it was, oh, nope, we're not going to touch this. We're just going to make sure that all of her adoptions are now considered legal. Why? Because they didn't want the children to return to biological parents. They didn't want to say, hey, you know what, this was fucked up. The child should then actually be with biological parents. Or find a way to co-parent in some way. Nope, we're not going to discuss that, right? Right. And you know who suffers? Usually, and I'm going to say usually like 90% of the time, the adoptee, right? They don't get the choice who to live with. They don't get the choice of do I stay with my adoptive parents? I'm having, I love being here. Maybe I get to know my biological parent, or do I go with them because I'm actually being abused, which happens majority of the time. But again, they don't care. They don't care about adoptees.
I met a couple from Tennessee who'd been working with Sandy Quick. They said they'd paid her $45,000 of the total $78,000 cost of the adoption.
This money that you came up with, $45,000, most people don't just have that lying around. How did you come up with that?
So we had taken out a home equity line of credit because we knew there was going to be some costs up front that we would have to pay to the adoption agency. We had also, several years ago, we had bought a piece of land that we had thought we were going to use. So we ended up selling that land.
How many acres of land did you sell?
It was about 3.5 acres.
3.5 acres.
We looked at it as like giving up one dream for another.
So you sent this in one lump sum. Did you ever get any itemization for it? Were there ever any receipts that were provided to you?
No, we received nothing like that.
Under the law, adoption expenses are supposed to be documented and submitted to a court. But a state audit found that Quick didn't submit expense reports in a timely manner for roughly 75% of her adoptions between 2024 and 2025. The Tennessee couple said they'd picked out a name for their baby and were preparing for her arrival when they got an email informing them that Sandy Quick was closing her agency.
We get the email and there's like immediate panic. I remember going like hot. My entire body got hot. And I immediately called her, immediately sent a text message, and I emailed and said, where is our money? You know, we are paying for services at the end of the day, and you are failing to render those services to us.
I admit that the more that I know with history, statistics, and laws, the less empathy I have towards adoptive parents, especially, or hopeful adoptive parents, especially in these circumstances where they lose their money. Whether it was fraudulent because someone scammed them or because the agency shut down. The services that you are talking about is trafficking a child. But oh no, you lost your money. Oh no, you didn't get your money's worth for the child, and oh gosh, they're speaking out. I don't feel bad. Now, should the agency directors be in jail, the owners, all that? Abso-fucking-lutely. But I also kind of think that you should be in jail too because you're trying to traffic children. You're so desperate to have a child that you're willing to pay to purchase a child. Those services is purchasing a child. And they're not recognizing it.
And we were like, where's the birth mother and where's our baby? Like,
right.
Have you transferred her to another agency? What's going on there? And we got no reply.
In her email, Quick cited what she called the changed legal landscape. The couple, along with several other families, still haven't gotten their money back and have filed complaints with the state attorney general's office.
This is something you read about on the news. Like, there's news articles. It's something you read about in a book or you see on TV, and it's happening to us. And that is...
Yeah, you never think it's going to happen to you.
Crazy. Yeah. You feel, taken advantage of. You feel embarrassed. You feel ashamed. Like, you feel all these things. But it was all out of our control, and that's what's, like, the biggest thing.
For years, many families went overseas to adopt children. Hundreds of thousands of babies were brought to the U.S. before scandals largely shut that practice down by the early 2000s. But the demand for babies continued, and an adoption attorney in Arizona found another way to fulfill it, bringing pregnant women into the U.S. and matching them with American families.
Hello, my name is Paul Peterson. Welcome to our website. Perhaps one of the most important decisions you will make is who you will trust to guide you through your adoption journey. I am confident that I can be that person.
Paul Peterson spent 2 years as a Mormon missionary in the Marshall Islands before becoming a lawyer and starting an adoption business in 2005, bringing birth mothers from the islands to the U.S. He expanded into Arkansas and Utah, where there were fewer hurdles in the adoption process. Dan and Rachel Christensen live south of Salt Lake City. They hired Peterson in 2018 to help them adopt a baby.
We had never done this before,
So we didn't know how it worked. I had a friend who had just adopted a little boy. So I reached out to her and she connected me with Paul.
And then we were thinking, okay, it's probably going to be like a year and a half, 2 years. And then it was
3 weeks. We got an email at 10:30 at night and it just said in the subject line, "You've been matched."
And then at the very bottom was his account and routing number to send $24,000.
$24,000 in like a couple days.
It was very strange.
Very strange, but you're not going to turn down a baby.
And that's what I'm talking about. The desperation that they have, right? Not just this couple, but so many adoptive parents or hopeful adoptive parents. Oh my gosh, I really want a baby. Oh my gosh, I really want a baby. They don't even consider that they are paying to purchase the child. They are not considering what the child will then go through. They're not considering what is happening to the biological mothers. They're not questioning anything at all. There's no self-awareness.
Peterson had matched them with a birth mother named Telma, who he'd brought to Utah from the Marshall Islands. They went to meet her at a local restaurant.
I remember just being like, "Are you freezing?" Because she was wearing like a muumuu and flip-flops and it was like February.
And it was snowing.
And we're like,
Why doesn't she have warm clothes?
like, what's our money doing?
Soon after meeting Telma, Rachel went to a prenatal appointment with her.
The doctor wanted to do an ultrasound and she said, "We need to take this baby because he's going to be stillborn." It was so scary. We had been told that she's been getting medical care all along the way.
Once that was kind of called into question with this being her first prenatal visit, then we're like, I wonder what else isn't like being done properly.
Telma was induced the following day. She gave birth to a boy the Christensens named Kai. A few days later, they went to the house where Telma was staying.
I remember walking in and there was all these pregnant women like sleeping on the floor. I don't know how Dan felt, but I was like, this is like a baby meal. Like, you would have a puppy meal. Like, that's what it felt like.
And still went through with the adoption. Do you guys notice that? And still went through with the adoption. They are full on recognizing this. But oh my gosh, we have the baby in our arms. And I can't tell, for sure that they had already gone to court because usually it takes, at least from my adoption, my adoptive parents had me in their custody for a month before the official adoption. And still went through with the adoption. Again, no self-awareness. Recognizing that there's issues, recognizing that there's trafficking, recognizing that these people are harmful, but still took the baby because they benefited.
And just being like, what have we done? Like, what is this?
The Christensens told Utah authorities about what had happened.
We identified about 60 birth mothers that had come here. I could just reach in there and pull out any of these, and there's going to be a picture of her passport. And this is just the Utah one, related ones.
Mick Spilker is an investigator at the Utah Attorney General's office. At the time of the Christensens' experience, he'd already been looking into Peterson after a complaint from a staff member at a local hospital.
We had received a call indicating some concerns about the numbers of Marshallese women that have been giving birth at their hospital. And then a few months later, another hospital called. One particular social worker had spoken with the birth mothers through a translator, and
found out that some of them really didn't know what was going on.
All of the women were from the Marshall Islands. All were placing their babies for adoption, and almost all of them had listed the same address and the same name, Paul Peterson, on their paperwork. Peterson eventually moved his operation to duplex apartments across town.
It's going to be up here on the left, just on this side.
And Spilker set up surveillance there.
We started subpoenaing some records, hospital records, bank records, email, social media. We started just getting everything.
The investigation expanded to other states and ended up detailing a multi-million-dollar operation using unlicensed middlemen to recruit pregnant Marshallese women with promises of money and a better life for their children.
All right, it is August 14th, 2019, 3:02 p.m. We're in the Marshall Islands AG's office.
In 2019, Spilker and a team of investigators traveled to the Marshall Islands to interview some of the birth mothers.
Did anybody offer her any money to go to the United States?
Yes.
Okay, how much?
It was supposed to be 3,000.
Some of the women said the full amount they were promised never materialized. And they said they had no ongoing relationships with their children, though they were told that they would.
Are you in contact with the baby's family?
No, I kept on calling them, but they're not answering my call.
Peterson appeared to be taking advantage of the fact that Marshallese culture encourages extended families to raise children together.
Did you understand what you were doing when you were doing the adoption as far as surrendering your parental rights?
I did not understand.
Had you known what those papers were meaning, would you have gone through with the adoption?
I wouldn't.
We felt they were just manipulated in one of the most personal and meaningful decisions of their lives.
Dan Strong was part of the team that conducted the interviews.
And I tend not to emotionalize cases very much, but it was hard for me in the room speaking to people who'd given up their child, and in some cases due to what was an incorrect understanding on their part, or and a lie, I think, on Paul Peterson's part, or at least a deliberate misleading or exploitation of this misunderstanding between our two cultures. It really made me sad. I remember tearing up in the room as we were asking questions.
If you don't have emotions, right, very strong ones towards people, when you hear their stories of exploitation and abuse and being a survivor, whatever that story may look like, whether it's adoption related or not, are you even human? Or are you even like, I'm not saying you can't be passionate at your job and you may be like from the opposite side, right? I get it. It's a job, right? You're supposed to represent them. But like, I guess morally I could never do that. I would have to end the contract with that client, right? Like I mean, this guy is the attorney general. But you're still not protecting victims. Oh, it's just a misunderstanding between our cultures. No, the fuck it's not. No, it's not. Because women that are in the same, or people, right, I should say people, that are in the same culture of the United States, right, are also being exploited. We have a history of this from colonial times. I've talked about this on my channel.
Yesterday, around this time, agents raided Peterson's home and law office in Mesa, taking evidence from both of those locations.
Peterson, who was an elected county official, was arrested in October 2019 as part of an effort by federal and state investigators from Arizona, Arkansas, and Utah.
The commercialization of children is illegal.
And the commoditization of children is simply evil.
Maricopa County Assessor Paul Peterson faces 62 state and federal felony charges for allegedly running a baby mill that ripped off taxpayers.
What's kind of crazy about this case is, if, as a prosecutor, as a lawyer, is if you just look at what happened, you just read it, somebody just tells it to you, it's obviously horrible. But from like a lawyer's perspective, it wasn't that easy to match up what happened to criminal charges. I think that's one way that this type of thing kind of avoids capture or avoids prosecution.
And that may be partly true only because the adoption laws protect the agencies as well as adoptive parents, but don't actually charge with human trafficking, which is literally if it walks like a duck, looks like a duck, and quacks like a duck, it's most definitely a duck. But you guys are afraid of putting that into terms. You're afraid of telling the truth, which is why you say, "Oh my gosh, but it's so hard to line up the charges." No, the fuck it's not. I mean, maybe partly, right? Because again, adoption laws protect them, but the adoption laws are protecting human traffickers, like I said, with Georgia Tan in Tennessee in 1953 when the full investigation was done, and they said, "Oh, but we're going to just make everything, accurate now." Never actually protecting the victims and survivors.
In the end, Peterson pled guilty to a number of state and federal charges, including fraud, and because of the international nature of the scheme, human smuggling. He's serving a sentence of more than 10 years.
I guess we couldn't deny that it was the right thing to do, to raise questions and to get, I guess, the Attorney General's office involved, help as much as we could to try to bring it to an end.
The Peterson case brought heightened concerns about adoptions, especially in Arkansas, where he had operated, and where there is a large Marshallese population. The state made changes to its adoption laws, but investigators continued to come across potential abuses involving pregnant Marshallese women.
We have more work that we need to do in this area to try to end the exploitation that we know is occurring among these birth mothers in Western Arkansas. We have to find those cases, we have to develop the information to be able to prosecute them, and we have to hold those individuals accountable. Yeah, so this is a picture I took standing outside.
Clay Folks helped oversee the Peterson prosecution and was the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Arkansas when I sat down with him last year. He told me he was particularly concerned about money being used as inducement for adoptions.
In certain circumstances, money can be paid to a pregnant woman to support them during their pregnancy, but under no circumstances can you provide cash money to a birth mother in order to induce them and convince them to put their baby up for adoption.
And that's where you guys don't understand that this entire thing is coercive and manipulative, right? I'm not saying that we shouldn't help pregnant people in crisis. We absolutely should, but to even say, "Hey, I'm going to help you," and then expect a child out of it is coercive. It's trafficking. That's what you're missing. I'm just going to end it here. They go on to basically say that there was other issues, that Utah had changed the law a couple times, that they're still fighting, but there's been some progress in the last couple years. And that's great and all in concept, but none of this helps adoptees. Sure, this is like, "Hey, we're just beginning to open the book on human trafficking. Oh, look, maybe adoptees might be right. Oh, birth parents who have a little bit of a higher standing than adoptees, God forbid the product speaks, we've been coerced and manipulative. Some people will listen to them, some people won't." And yes, it's great that adoptive parents and other people that are participating in adoption, whether they're lawyers or they're judges or they're directors, are talking about it. But at the same time, this, I don't know. I had high hopes going into this documentary at first, right? When I heard that they were doing this, I was like, oh my gosh, they're finally calling it what it is. I love PBS. I think they do a fantastic job. They're very well educated. The fact that they are saying this is great. More people will listen. Fantastic. And then I guess I was just a little bit more disappointed than other people, right? Again, glad they did this. I hope that they continue to do this. I'm glad Gabrielle Glaser continues to do her work, and she is now well educated. Like I said in the beginning, like I have mixed feelings on her as a adoption journalist, especially by her own admittance in her book. But great, this needs to be talked about. But at the same time, I just don't see a lot of these people doing a self-reflection, right? And we have so much work to do. And that, again, that's not trying to be a negative Nancy. That means like, hey, we need help. We need the adoptive parents to reflect, try to do better, get the therapy, and be like, look, yeah, I unfortunately participated in a industry and I didn't recognize the harm, but what can I do now going forward? How can I help not only the adoptee in my life, but the adoptees that came before my adoptee and or after? What can we do to change it? How can we help? Same thing with the bio parents, right? Obviously, we need better rights and make PACA agreements legally binding and enforceable, but there's so much more to it. We need reform. And I just kind of didn't see any of that throughout this. Now, again, I do hope that PBS continues to highlight a lot of these issues, not just in Utah, but other states, other laws, other cases, right? I think that's wonderful, but I don't know, like, it just felt like there was just, it still just didn't hold them accountable. There was no mirror of self-reflection. There was no big progress, right? Like I just, again, I don't know what Gabrielle said to any of these individuals after the meeting, right? I get it. She's a journalist. She has to be quote unquote unbiased, right? I get that. But it also very much lacked adoptee voices. And I think that's what pissed me off the most, is because often we do hear from the adoptive parents. And then second most heard are the birth parents. But when adoptees talk, when adoptees tell their stories, when adoptees are telling you things and have been for over a century, we get shut down. Oh, you're a horrible person. How dare you? Oh, your mother should have killed you. Or, wow, you're a waste of space. Or, wow, I can't believe, like, and by the way, this comes from all parts of society, not just the non-constellation part of adoption, but also from people that are well within the constellation. They don't want to hear it, right? And it's just frustrating. So I guess for me, I was just disappointed. But I do give credit where credit is due. So I think that I hope, let me rephrase that. I hope that they continue to do better. Um Again, I get that the journalist has to be quote unquote unbiased, but at the same time, it's also very frustrating for those that are affected day to day that we don't have the same human rights. That's just my 2 cents. Anyway, I hope you go watch the video uninterrupted and or watch the ending at least. Go support their page. Thank you very much, and I'll see you guys another time.